Nutrition Security, the Public Service International Trade Union Rights Philippines, Nagkaisa Labor Coalition, Philippine Government Employees Association, Public Services Labor Employment Confederation, Centro Publico, Confederation of Independent Union, Philippine Independent Public Sector Employees, kapisano ng mga manggagawa sa GOCC at GFIs, and then guests of Senator Gordon, Attorney Rogelio Surao, Vice Chairman and Executive of National Police Commission, Administrator Jose Mayras Marquez, the Court Administrator, Supreme Court of the Philippines, and the local government unit of Kalayaan, Laguna, headed by the Mayor Lenny Adao and former Municipal Mayor Teodoro Adao, together with the Sangguniang Bayan members. We'd like to welcome them to the Senate, Mr. President.
So to all of our guests, welcome to the Senate of the Philippines and also to the rest of the people in the gallery. And one request that if we can keep the level of the noise low so we can conduct our proceedings efficiently. Thank you very much to all of our visitors.
Mr. President, before we proceed with the reference of business, on August 6, which is a Sunday, it'll be the birthday of Senator Trillanes. On August 5, it'll be the birthday of Senator Richard Gordon. And on today, August 2, is the birthday of Senator Joel Villanueva. So I move to suspend the sessions to greet our
Session
colleagues. A very happy birthday.
Session is suspended, but they are reminded to celebrate separately.
We're ready to resume, Mr. President.
Session is resumed.
Mr. President, I move that we proceed with the reference of business.
Is there any objection? Hearing none, the motion is approved. Secretary, let's do the reference of business.
Message from the House of Representatives. Letter from the House of Representatives informing the Senate that on 26 July 2017 it adopted House Concurrent Resolution number 12 entitled Concurrent Resolution Providing for the Legislative Calendar for the Second Regular Session of the 17th Congress of the Philippines, in which it requests the concurrence of the Senate.
To the archives.
Bills on first reading, 1535, an act prohibiting incumbent government officials to name government projects after them or other persons whose name or identity may in any manner be associated with said officials and or from claiming credit through signage around announcing a public works project. Senator Emmanuel Manny Pacquiao.
To the Committees on Civil Service, Government Organization and Professional Regulation, and Public Works.
1536, an act penalizing the imposition of a no permit, no exam policy on any such policy that prohibits students in all educational institutions from taking their periodic, preliminary, midterm, or final examinations due to unpaid tuition and other school fees. Senator Emmanuel Manny Pacquiao.
To the Committee on Education, Arts, and Culture.
Resolutions. 451, resolution directing the Senate Committee on Public Order and Dangerous Drugs to conduct an investigation in aid of legislation on the alleged reprehensible practice of certain police officers of concealing cases of extrajudicial killings by dumping the bodies of victims in Manila Bay, with the end in view of formulating tighter mechanisms for enforcing the accountability of police officers and strengthening the Philippine criminal justice system by institutionalizing safeguards and imposing heavier penalties against police officers who attempt to evade justice by destroying the evidence of their crimes. Senator Laila De Lima.
To the Committee on Public Order and Dangerous Drugs.
452, resolution directing the appropriate Senate committee to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation into the newly launched identification card of overseas Filipino workers, with the end in view of establishing more transparent guidelines for its implementation. Senator Laila M. De Lima.
To the Committee on Labor, Employment, and Human Resources Development.
Communication. Letter from the Office of the President of the Philippines transmitting to the Senate two original copies of Republic Act Number 10927 entitled An Act Designating Casinos as Covered Persons under Republic Act Number 9160, otherwise known as the Anti-Money Laundering Act of 2001, as amended, which was signed by President Rodrigo Roa Duterte.
To the archives.
Committee report 145, prepared and submitted jointly by the Committees on Health and Demography, Women, Children, Family Relations, and Gender Equality and Finance on Senate Bill number 1537 with Senators Angara, Poe, Recto, Villar, Ejercito, Hontiveros, Villanueva, Binay, and Ligarda as authors thereof, entitled An Act Providing for the Scaling Up of Nutrition for the First 1,000 Days of Life through a Strengthened Integrated Strategy for Maternal, Neonatal, Child Health and Nutrition, reconstituting for the purpose the National Nutrition Council, appropriating funds therefore and for other purposes, recommending its approval in substitution of Senate Bill numbers 136, 161, 831, 1114, 1133, 1145, and 1257, Senators Joseph Victor Ejercito and Risa Hontiveros.
To the calendar for ordinary business.
Additional reference of business. Message from the House of Representatives. Letter from the House of Representatives informing the Senate that on 24 July 2017 it concurred with Senate Concurrent Resolution number 6 entitled Concurrent Resolution creating a joint committee of the Senate and the House of Representatives to notify the President of the Philippines that Congress now convened for a second regular session of the 17th Congress of the Philippines is ready to hear his State of the Nation address in a joint session of both houses.
To the archives.
Resolution 453, resolution directing the appropriate committee in the Senate to conduct an investigation in aid of legislation on the suspicious circumstances in which the search warrant was implemented inside the Parohinog compound in Usami City, leading to the death of Mayor Rinaldo Parohinog, members of his family, and security staff, introduced by Senator Laila de Lima.
To the Committees on Public Order and Dangerous Drugs and Justice and Human Rights. Senator
Mr.
Dillon.
President, may I move that the other sessions in the Senate Hall be adjourned so that we can only have one session?
Mr. President, with the permission of the body, I move to transfer from the calendar for ordinary business to the calendar for special order, Senate Bill 1533, under Committee Report 143.
Is there any objection? There being none, motion is approved.
I move to consider Senate Bill 1533 under Committee Report 143.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
Mr. President, may I ask the Secretary to read the title of the measure?
An act institutionalizing the Balik Scientist program, appropriating funds therefore and for other purposes.
Mr. President, to sponsor the measure, may we ask the Chairman of the Committee on Science and Technology, Senator Bam Aquino, be recognized.
Senator Aquino is recognized.
Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, magandang hapon. It's my honor and privilege to stand before you today to sponsor Senate Bill number 1533 under Committee Report number 143, otherwise known as an act institutionalizing the Balik Scientist program, appropriating funds therefore and for other purposes. Mr. President, around the world and on social media, we see the rise of scientists, engineers, and those in the STEM fields as new heroes and rock stars. Hardcore scientists like Stephen Hawking, Neil deGrasse Tyson, and the late Carl Sagan have captured hordes of fans and followers for their understanding and enthusiasm for the world. Even innovators and enablers of science and technology like Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg are recognized as global icons. One can say that we live in the era of the scientist, the engineer, and the innovator, Mr. President. Here, Mr. President, science plays a big role in the lives of Filipinos, from improving food production, access to water and electricity, and even in our work to strengthen disaster preparedness and conservation efforts. The challenge for us today is to ramp up support for Filipino scientists, engineers, and researchers, and to harness their talents, not just to boost industries and business, but to build a better Philippines for all. As chairman of the Science Committee on Science and of the Senate Committee on Science and Technology, Mr. Chairman, we are pushing for measures to encourage scientists, engineers, and innovators to stay in the Philippines and work on the development of the country. Yesterday, we spoke in support of the Innovative Startup Act, and today we are sponsoring the passage of the amendments to the Magna Carta for scientists, engineers, researchers, and S&T professionals, as well as the Balik Scientist Bill. Mr. President, esteemed colleagues, we seek your support to embolden Filipinos abroad, those working in the field of science and technology, to come home and help us solve our country's problems. Our country still lacks 19,000 scientists to meet the bare minimum that is essential and acceptable in the development of any country, Mr. President. Worse, Mr. President, we are losing our bright minds to other countries. Many Filipino science and technology professionals would rather work overseas, where they will be compensated fairly and where they will be valued for their contributions to research. To address this, the DOST launched the Balik Scientist program as early as 1975 to bring back Filipino scientists, engineers, and technology entrepreneurs to work in various fields, including health, food and agriculture, ICT, and even alternative energy. Mr. President, it's about time that we institutionalize and strengthen the Balik Scientist program so that more brilliant Filipino minds residing abroad can help our nation move forward into prosperity. This measure includes benefits for Filipino innovators who choose to return to the country. These benefits include financial benefits, tax exemptions, funds for infrastructure, and grants and aid research projects. Other benefits include special working and non-working visas and even fares for plane tickets, Mr. President. Mr. President, we cannot stress enough that science and technology, engineering and innovation can help solve some of our nation's biggest problems like disaster preparedness, effective delivery of healthcare and other social services, hunger and nutrition, poverty, and unemployment. Let's bring our scientists, engineers, tech entrepreneurs home and empower them to take part in our country's progress. Palagahan po natin ang ating agham at teknolohiya at mga siyentipiko, mga inhinyero at mga researcher upang tuluyang umasenso ang Pilipinas. Mr. President, I call on all of our colleagues to support Senate Bill 1533 under Committee Report number 143, the Balik Scientist program. Maraming salamat, Mr. President.
Can I ask that I be made a co-author of the measure?
Yes, of course, Mr. President.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Mr. President, Senator Zubiri also wishes to be a co-author.
May I be made, with the permission of the sponsor, could we be made also a co-author of the measure?
Gladly, Mr. President.
And together with Senator Villanueva,
Senator
also,
Villanueva.
Mr. President. Then Senator J.V. Ejercito will deliver his co-sponsorship speech on Monday. So with that, Mr. President,
Mr. President, Senator Gordon also wishes to be a co-sponsor and we gladly accept.
Majority Leader.
Thank you. Mr. President, I move that we suspend consideration of Senate Bill 1533 under Committee Report 143 to give time to the other members to study the proposed measure.
Is there any objection? Hearing none, we suspend consideration.
Thank you. And now, with the permission of the Chamber, I move to transfer from the calendar for ordinary business to the calendar for special orders. Senate Bill 1534 under Committee Report 144.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
I move to consider Senate Bill 1534 under Committee Report 144.
Is there any objection? Hearing none, we now proceed to consider Senate Bill number 1534 under Committee Report.
1534, yes.
Under Committee Report number 144.
May we ask Secretary to read the title of the measure?
An act amending Republic Act number 8439, otherwise known as the Magna Carta for scientists, engineers, researchers, and other science and technology personnel in the government.
To sponsor the measure, may we ask again the Chairman of the Committee on Science and Technology, Senator Bam Aquino, be recognized.
Senator Aquino is recognized.
Mr. President, maraming salamat, Majority Floor Leader. Thank you. Distinguished colleagues, good afternoon again. It is an honor to sponsor Senate Bill 1534 under Committee Report number 144. This is an act amending Republic Act 8493, otherwise known as the Magna Carta for scientists, engineers, researchers, and other science and technology personnel in the Government Act. Mr. President, as a long-time science fiction fan, it's been my privilege to work with our country's scientists, researchers, and innovators. Together, we endeavored to create a law that will empower our fellow Filipinos to enter the field of science and technology and work on the development of our country. Mr. President, the field of science and technology is a key driver to our progress and prosperity. Life expectancy has more than doubled since the beginning of the 1900s thanks to advancements in healthcare. The world is transitioning to clean, renewable energy thanks to better solar panels, windmills, and electric vehicles. And Mr. President, we are already regularly sending people to explore space. But closer to home, Mr. President, we're still struggling with issues like lack of infrastructure, poor public transportation systems, slow and expensive internet services, and the enduring problem of poverty and hunger. Now, Mr. President, who do we look for solutions to these areas? Dare I say, Mr. President, that we should look to our scientists, our researchers, our engineers, and our innovators to help us find the best solutions to our problems. Unfortunately, Mr. President, the field of science and technology is undervalued in the Philippines. Currently, there are only 189 scientists per 1 million Filipinos. Kumbaga, Mr. President, ang numerong ito ay napakababa compared sa ibang mga bansa sa mundo. South Korea has 5,300 scientists per million people. United States has 3,000 per million people. And our close neighbor, Malaysia, has 2,000 scientists per million people. Tayo po sa ating bansa kulang ng 19,000 scientists and PhD graduates upang makipagsabay, Mr. President. Sayang naman, Mr. President, kung dahil lang sa kakulangan natin ng researcher at engineer, hindi na po natin maaayos ang mga problema ng ating bansa, gaya ng trapiko, ng MRT, ng LRT, pampublikong transportasyon, at iba pang mga problema na kaya pong tugunan ng maayos na siyensya. Sayang naman po kung ang kakulungan pong ito ay magbibigay po ng dahilan kung bakit po nagmamahal ang presyo ng bigas at iba pang agricultural products. Truly, Mr. President, we can look to science, technology, engineering to solve even the most basic problems of our people. Institutionalized support for scientists, engineers, researchers, science and technology personnel in the Philippines is long overdue. It's about time that we amend our Magna Carta, Mr. President. First, let's update the current salary scale of Filipino science and technology professionals and ensure that they are reasonably compensated within the country. Second, let's remove the limit currently set when a Filipino scientist is awarded externally funded grants. We should not restrict the support that they can get from other sources, Mr. President. Third, we need to improve access to benefits, particularly for our science and technology professionals working in agencies and departments outside the DOST. Fourth, and this was proposed by Senator Angara, we should raise the retirement age of S&T professionals from 60 to 65 to encourage opportunities for mentorship. Mr. President, amending the Magna Carta for our scientists is just one step forward in empowering our Filipino scientists, but I believe it's a step in the right direction. The goal, Mr. President, is to create and encourage more and more scientific minds in the Philippines dedicated to nation building. Let's begin by passing these amendments to the Magna Carta. And I'm hopeful, Mr. President, that with more Filipino scientists, researchers, and engineers, we can finally achieve prosperity for every Filipino. So again, Mr. President, I call on all of our colleagues to support Senate Bill 1534 under Committee Report number 144, amendments to the Magna Carta for scientists, engineers, researchers, and other science and technology personnel in the government. Maraming salamat, Mr. President.
Thank you. And can I make the same request as earlier?
Of course, Mr. President, gladly.
Mr. President, may we recognize Senator Lauren Legarda to co-sponsor the measure, Senate Bill 1534.
Senator Legarda is recognized.
Mr. President, Senator Legarda is fully supportive of 1534, the amendments to the Magna Carta, and wishes to also be a co-author.
So no more co-sponsorship
She is the principal author, Mr. President. So the first one to file this bill in which Congress? In previous Congresses.
So,
every Congress, Mr. President, the good lady has been filing this bill.
No, I've been pushing for this amendment to the Magna Carta, and I'm not going to read any speech. I just wanted to thank Senator Bamakino for giving importance to our scientists, our researchers. And what's important here is that we should make the science work for us. Let not the output of our scientists and our researchers remain in the archives of universities and laboratories and USBs, etc. What's important, whether it's in climate research or disaster risk reduction or in health, that we use the output of science so that it can be used for the betterment of our people. And that's a challenge for all our scientists to even lend or give the research to policymakers like us and to give it to the heads of departments so that it can actually be implemented, whether it's in climate-smart agriculture or in the discovery of the cure to some virus or disease. And so I am in full support to this amendment to the Magna Carta. It is not true that I filed this in the 3rd Congress because I was not yet alive then. And but I know that I had filed this previously, and if I'm not mistaken, I'm the principal author. Now, it doesn't matter who filed first and who filed last or who did not file. What's important is that we give importance to science and technology. And actually, parang kapatid din ito ng bagong panukalang batas na nag-3rd reading, yung Innovation Act of Senator Sherwin Gatchalian. So I applaud you, commend you for giving importance to science and technology, to our engineers and scientists and researchers. Thank you, Mr. President.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Zubiri.
Thank you, Mr. President. With the permission of Senator Bam, if I could be made also co-author of this measure, Mr. President.
Gladly, Mr. President.
And just a brief manifestation to add to the already very interesting manifestation of Senator Lauren Legarda. Basically, I recall one time when I had briefly left the Senate, Mr. President, I had a chance to visit India for some technology research, and I had a chance to go to this town or city. It was the fastest growing city of India called Pune, P-U-N-E. And I was wondering why many of the businessmen from all over the world were congregating and visiting Pune. Apparently, they created a full eco zone, Mr. President, in their city because they put emphasis on science and technology and research and development to their people. As a matter of fact, they graduate 40,000 engineers a year. The time when I went there, 2012, 40,000 engineers per year. As a matter of fact, their two state-run universities have produced 4 Nobel Peace Prizes winners for science. And that is why it became the fastest growing city, because of their emphasis on research and development, science and technology. They can reverse engineer anything from the world and price it half the price. So they were the biggest competitors of China during this time, early part of 2012. So I fully support this, Your Honor. We really need to shift our focus from how do you say, service-oriented graduates, hotel and restaurant, etc., to more engineers, more scientists, more dedicated to research and technology. I'd like to take note of the fact that the winner of the new winner of Miss Earth, by the way, is a nuclear physicist. That is something for the book. So I hope we have more of those, not just beauty, but also with brains. Thank you, Mr. President.
Mr. President, I move to suspend consideration of Senate Bill 1534 under Committee Report 144.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
Mr. President, I move to transfer from the calendar for ordinary business to the calendar for special order Senate Bill 1537 under Committee Report 145.
Any objection? Hearing none, the motion is approved.
I move to consider Senate Bill 1537 under Committee Report 145.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
We ask Secretary to read the title of the measure.
Please do so, Secretary.
An act providing for the scaling up of nutrition for the first 1,000 days of life through a strengthened integrated strategy for maternal, neonatal, child health and nutrition, reconstituting for the purpose the National Nutrition Council, appropriating funds therefore and for other purposes.
Mr. President, to sponsor the measure, may we ask the Senator Risa Ontiveros be recognized. Afterwards, Senator Angara and the Chair of the Committee on Health, Senator J.V. Ejercito, will deliver their co-sponsorship speeches. Senator Nancy Binay will deliver her co-sponsorship speech on Monday. In the meantime, Senator Ontiveros, Mr. President.
Senator Ontiveros is recognized.
Salamat po, Mr. President, at magandang hapon. Together with one of my co-sponsors, Health Committee Chair J.V. Ejercito, I say this is for our children. Despite global efforts to reduce hunger and malnutrition, undernutrition remains to be among the leading causes of death of children, with more than 2.6 million deaths annually. Studies have shown that poor nutrition weakens the immune systems of children, making them vulnerable to common diseases such as diarrhea, pneumonia, and malaria. Poor nutrition in the early years likewise results in stunting, wasting, low birth weight, and micronutrient deficiencies. The early years of life are a crucial period of mental and physical development. Malnutrition at this critical junction creates irreversible damage to children. The effects of undernourishment during the first 1,000 days do not stop at childhood, and unfortunately, the children suffer from this damage even when they become adults. Stunting, or the failure to grow to proper height, has been shown to be associated with greater risk for disease, poor health, poor school performance, poor productivity, and lower earning capacity as adults. Malnutrition is the agent by which poverty viciously perpetuates itself. Sadly, millions of children do not have the opportunity to reach their full potential because of poor nutrition in the earliest months of their lives. The Food and Nutrition Research Institutes estimate that close to 1/3 of Filipinos under 5 years old are stunted. Notably, The prevalence is highest among the poorest 20% of the population, with close to half of poor children being short for their age. Investment in good nutrition during the critical 1,000 days from pregnancy to a child's second birthday is crucial to developing a child's cognitive capacity and physical growth. Ensuring that every child receives the adequate nutrition and is provided the critical health services during this window can yield dividends for a lifetime, allowing them to perform better in school, more effectively fight off diseases, earn more as adults, and become healthy, productive citizens. Mr. President, this is also for our mothers. There is an inextricable link between the well-being of mothers and our children. Undernourished mothers are more likely to suffer difficult pregnancies and give birth to undernourished children themselves. They are also vulnerable to increased risk of death or giving birth to a preterm, underweight, or malnourished infant. Studies have shown that when mothers have health care, education, and economic opportunity, both mother and child will have the best chance to survive and thrive. However, an alarming number of mothers in developing countries like the Philippines are not getting the nutrition and health care they need. Mr. President, last and certainly not the least, this is for our future. Malnutrition costs many developing nations an estimated 2 to 3% of our GDP each year. Available data shows that stunted children will earn less on average as adults. In fact, the loss of human potential resulting from stunting was associated with 20% less adult income on average. Globally, the direct cost of child malnutrition is estimated at $20 to $30 billion per year. For the Philippines in 2013, it was estimated that there were 328 billion pesos loss in income as a result of lower levels of education for the working population who suffered from childhood stunting, lost productivity due to premature deaths among children who would have been members of our current working age population, and from additional education costs to cover grade repetitions linked to undernutrition. This 328 billion pesos amounted to 3% of the Philippine GDP in 2013. Yet, our government's investment in nutrition programs to combat malnutrition is only at 0.52% of government expenditures compared to the global average spending of 2.1%. The Department of Health and National Nutrition Council budget for nutrition programs for all age groups in 2017, amounting to 1.9 billion pesos, only accounts for 1.3% of the total national government allocation for the health sector. It's uncertain how much local government units invest in nutrition programs, but based on consultations with the various stakeholders in the communities, local government investment for nutrition programs has a lot of room for improvement. The figures speak of a glaring finding that for every $1 spent on programs to prevent stunting during the first 1,000 days, the Philippines could save over $100 in health, education, and lost productivity costs. Undernutrition during the first 1,000 days is critical to the future health, well-being, and success of a child. It affects the child's ability to grow, learn, and become productive adults. Poor nutrition harms our children, our mothers, our nation. It can impede economic growth, and it can extend the cycle of poverty. We need to scale up nutrition during the first 1,000 days of life. We have to make sure that the fight against malnutrition is a priority of both the national and local governments, and that these agencies and LGUs are provided the adequate support to plan and implement the programs that will ensure, Mr. President, that we have healthy nanays to give birth to healthy Bulilits, who in turn will grow up to become healthy Pinoys and Pinays for a healthier and more progressive Philippines. Salamat po, Mr. President.
Mr. President, may we recognize the Chairman of the Committee on Health, Senator J.B. Ejercito, to co-sponsor the measure.
Senator Ejercito is recognized.
Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, today is an honor to sponsor a measure which fights for the right to life of every mother and child. Senate Bill number 1537, under Committee Report number 145, or the Healthy Nanay and Bulilit Act. Goal number 3 in the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals is good health and well-being. It is probably just right to remind this chamber that the Philippines, despite its efforts for the past years, failed to meet its commitment under the Millennium Development Goals to reduce maternal mortality to 52 per 100,000 live births by 2015. This is reflected in a report by the UP Econ Foundation Incorporated. Going over the data, Mr. President, on maternal mortality, I have admittedly driven further this piece of legislation. There had been no progress in the previous years when it comes to maternal and neonatal health. The local government units, which are supposed to be in the front line in curbing the numbers, remained passive over the years. The flagship programs of the government to curb the numbers remained immaterial to its own objective. Mr. President, the first 1,000 days of life refers to the period of a child's life, spanning the 9 months in the womb, starting from conception to the first 24 months of his or her life, which is considered to be the critical window of opportunity to prevent malnutrition and its lifelong consequences. If we should invest on our human capital, I believe that it is imperative to invest at the earliest stage of our people's lives, where we can at least control the results and be assured of a better outcome. The first 1,000 days of life of a child is the most crucial stage. Lack of nutrition and a hostile environment might lead to the child's abnormal growth or health. Mr. President, the mother's health is equally important in nurturing her young. From pregnancy to delivery and the early stage of a child's development are always the most crucial time. Reports show that maternal deaths are easily prevented through proper care and access to health services. Let me impart to you, Mr. President, my dear colleagues, that the committee's vision for the passage of this measure. It is the humble representation's vision not just to curb maternal mortality, but instill in the mind of every implementing agency and stakeholders the importance of lowering these deaths through innovative and sustainable solutions, such as scaling up nutrition for the first 1,000 days of the life of a child. It is our vision to inculcate prevention through a targeted approach and interventions provided at the different life stages of a child. It is our vision to empower our local government units and other stakeholders to see the benefits of having a healthier society through the delivery of maternal and neonatal health services. It is our vision to dream big for our fellow Filipinos to achieve ginhawa para sa lahat. This being said, I earnestly request this chamber's support for the speedy passage of this bill. Mr. President, thank you. Dear colleagues, thank you and good afternoon.
Mr. President, may we recognize Senator Sally Angara.
Senator Angara is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President, Majority Leader. Distinguished colleagues, I rise today to co-sponsor Senate Bill 1537, or the Healthy Nanay and Bulilit Act, or the first 1,000 days program. Mr. President, our government, particularly this Senate, has exerted tremendous effort in making sure that all Filipinos live more comfortable lives today and in the long run. Countless hearings, consultations with experts, concerned groups and constituents, and work hours have been spent. This has resulted in reforms in education, health, poverty alleviation, and technology, among others. And while we have passed certain measures to bring healthcare closer to Filipinos of all age and disposition, there are still avenues in which we can improve upon our efforts. That is why I am proud to co-sponsor this bill along with my colleagues, Senator Risa Ontiveros, Senator J.V. Ejercito, and others who have co-authored, that will ensure that appropriate healthcare will be afforded to both our mothers and their newborns. It is only right that we strive for the betterment of our children by protecting the welfare of our mothers. Mahalaga ang nutrisyon. Poor nutrition remains a major problem in our country, as stated by a study by the Interagency Regional Analyst Network and the Action Against Hunger. Their report revealed that 3.4 million children under 5 years are found to be stunted, while over 300,000 are underweight. Currently, Mr. President, pang-10 tayo sa mga bansa na may pinakamataas na bilang ng mga stunted na bata. Based on 2015, from the Food Nutrition and Research Institute, the stunting or chronic malnutrition rate among Filipino children is at 33.4%, which is higher than Vietnam at 23% and Cambodia at 32.9%. Mabigat po ang epekto nitong kakulangan sa nutrisyon. As the World Bank reported about victims of malnutrition during their early years, a 1% loss in adult height as a result of childhood stunting is linked with a 1.4% loss in economic productivity, making them earn 20% less as adults. Furthermore, according to a 2013 report by the FAO, or the Food and Agricultural Organization, the cost to the global economy caused by malnutrition as a result of lost productivity and direct healthcare costs could account for as much as 5% of global GDP, equivalent to $3.5 trillion per year or $500 per person. Mr. President, paano po ang lahat ng ating mga pinagsisikapang reforma kung hindi naman napapakinabangan ng buo ng ating mga kabataan? As they say, the trouble with the future is that it usually arrives before we're ready for it. This rings true especially for the families in Marawi City, in Iligan City, in the evacuation centers. Marami ang naghihirap dahil sa kakulangan ng mga child-friendly spaces at mga lugar para sa mga lactating mothers at sa dito sa mga evacuation centers. Kaya nagpapasalamat po tayo sa lahat ng volunteer groups na nag-organize, nag-mobilize para tumulong sa mga bata at mga nanay. At para mabigyan ng lunas ang kakulangan ng tamang pagkain, malinis na tubig, as well as other problems like poor sanitation and hygiene, Mr. President. Through this bill, we can finally address these problems, not just in the conflict areas, but all over our nation. The DOH and the National Nutrition Council, in coordination with other concerned agencies, will be tasked to develop a practical and comprehensive strategy for pregnant and lactating women, as well as for the health and nutrition of their newborns, covering the time they're in their mother's womb until 2 years after birth. Furthermore, to address the cyclical nature of malnutrition, Mr. President, healthcare and nutrition services shall also be provided to adolescent girls from 10 to 18 years old, which will include an assessment of health and nutrition status, as well as the provision of immunization, oral health services, and micronutrient supplements, among others. The municipal, city, and provincial local government units, or LGUs, will also be given an active role since they will have the responsibility of implementing this act and shall be tasked to include the maternal, neonatal, child health and nutrition program in their respective local nutrition action plans and investment plans for health. This goes hand in hand with the study that says that proper nutrition in the first 1,000 days prevents more than 1/3 of child deaths per year, improves school attainment by at least 1 year, increases wages by 5% to 50%, reduces poverty as well-nourished children are 33% more likely to escape poverty as adults, and empowers women to be 10% more likely to run their own businesses and to break the intergenerational cycle of poverty. Kung naniniwala nga tayo na nakasalalay sa ating mga anak ang ating kinabukasan, nararapat lamang, Mr. President, na sila'y ating pinoprotektahan at inaaruga bago pa man sila'y isinilang. Nakahanay maski ang kalikasan sa pag-aruga ng sanggol. Bago siya ipanganak, nasa sinapupunan muna siya ng kanyang ina, at kapag ipinanganak na siya, tama lang na may lipunang nakaabang para yapusin silang dalawa ng wagas sa pag-aaruga. To keep aiming for a better Philippines in terms of economic and inclusive growth, we need to make sure that there will be healthy Filipinos to greet and welcome this future, Mr. President. I believe that this bill will be among the most effective anti-poverty measures alongside the conditional cash transfer and other anti-poverty programs. I thank once again our colleagues, Senator Risa, Senator JV, as well as my fellow co-authors, Senator Grace, Senator Ralph, Senator Cynthia Villar, Senator Joel Villanueva, the birthday boy, and Senator Lauren Legarda, who was not present in the 3rd Congress. And I call on the immediate passage of this measure, Mr. President. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Po is raising her hand, yes?
Yes, Mr. President. Senator Grace po to co-sponsor the measure.
Also to co-sponsor. Senator
Yes.
Po is recognized.
Thank you. Mr. President, I would like to stress to my colleagues the importance of this bill, not just because I'm a co-author, but because as a woman, as a mother, and as a legislator that's actually been following this advocacy, I am all the more convinced about the importance of this especially now that we are trying to gain our economic independence and status in the world. Our greatest resource is our people and workforce, but the quality of our workforce is dependent on the intelligence and physical health of our workers. Paano tayo magiging competitive kung hindi naman matalino ang ating mga manggagawa at palagi namang nagkakasakit? May mga pag-aaral talaga na nagsasabi na ang katalinuhan ng isang bata ay nagmumula sa sinapupunan, sapagkat dyan binubuo ang kanyang pag-iisip, ang kanyang utak. Meron pong mga x-ray na pinakita na ang utak ng isang batang inalagaan ng nanay ng tamang nutrisyon nung siya'y nagbubuntis ay mas malaki kesa dun sa batang hindi nabigyan ng tamang pag-aaruga habang nasa tiyan. Tinutulak natin ang libreng tuition sa state universities and colleges at nararapat lamang na bigyan natin ng suporta ang ating mga estudyante. Pero aanuhin naman natin ang libreng edukasyon kung maraming nagda-drop out dahil nagkakasakit, nagugutom o hindi nakakayanan ang klase ng edukasyon na ibinibigay sa kanila. How can we say that how can we sustain our economic growth and infrastructure if the quality of our workers cannot even stay at par with our Asian neighbors? Why am I saying this? Because actually there is proof that the mother in the first 1,000 days of a child's life is critical to the brain development of a child. Kung tama ang kinakain at merong tamang pag-aaruga, siguradong lalaki ang batang matalino. Hindi ko lang sinasabi ito dahil maganda pakinggan, kundi meron talagang mga napatunayang eksperimento na nagsasabi ang batang inalagaan ay batang lalaking matalino. Sa Quezon, sa probinsya ng Quezon, na nag-text lang sa akin ng governor at sinasabi nanalo sila ng Galing Puok Award sapagkat yung kanilang first 1,000 children na na-benefit nila a few years ago, habang buntis ang nanay, inalagaan nilang mga nanay, ang mga batang pinanganak na yan, hindi nagkakasakit, very healthy, at hindi katulad ng mga batang hindi nasama sa programa na yan. Sa ibang bansa, pag ang isang nanay ay mahirap, anong binibigay ng Estado? Binibigyan ng gatas, binibigyan ng peanut butter para may protein ang nanay na yon. Hindi naman natin ikahihirap na ibigay yan sa mga barangay health centers. Mr. President, baliwala ang programa ng gobyerno sa infrastruktura, sa edukasyon, kung ang mga tao natin mismo ay hindi naman kayang gampanan ang hamon ng bagong ekonomiya ngayon. Kailangan matalino sila. At sinasabi ko na, wag na natin panghinayangan ang budget na ibibigay natin na diretso sa tiyan ng ating mga nanay. At ako'y natutuwa dahil ang aking mga kasama dito ay hindi lamang mga babae, kundi ang mga main sponsors nito ay mga lalaki rin. Dahil alam ninyo kung gaano kahalagang magpalaki ng isang bata na tama. Kaya muli maraming salamat at hinihiling ko na sana kahit hindi nasama ito sa priority measures, common sense na lang, ipasa natin ito. Maraming salamat po.
Thank you. Mr. President, Senator Loren Ligarda wishes to co-sponsor, and then Senator Bam Aquino.
Senator Ligarda is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is to express my support for this measure, being a co-author of the measure, and I think half of the Senate, and let the whole Senate be co-authors and co-sponsors of this very important measure. Let me just put on record, Mr. President, that it is the duty of the National Nutrition Council to actually map the whole country. For the 80 provinces, I would ask them to present to us what they've done in the past years in terms of addressing the nutritional needs of our children. And perhaps if we could find out which are the areas where there is massive malnutrition, to be able to address this not only through the National Nutrition Council DOH budget, but also through the DepEd budget, the DA budget, and other budgetary amendments. All I'm saying is that this is a very good bill, but if the Nutrition Council was actually doing its mandate, they should have done this a long, long time ago. The strategy of taking care of lactating women, of our children, is a mandate of the DOH and other agencies. And so I support this measure. However, it is incumbent upon the National Nutrition Council, even before this is enacted into law, that they should be doing this already. And I've talked about this since 1998. They should have been doing this. Why does Congress have to enact a measure for them to come up with a strategy? I am certain that many of the provisions in this proposed measure are already known to them. Let it not be said, and they should not say it, that Congress does not give importance to their mandate or to the importance of nutrition in our country. Thank you, Mr. President. And I hope that this could be enacted into law soon, within the year, before the budget deliberations are over by both houses of Congress, so that we can actually make it a priority measure and not an unfunded law. So let not the debates be prolonged, and so before October, if it is enacted into law, then we can fund this very important measure, so that when the President delivers his SONA next year, he can talk about this important measure where there was bipartisan support for the nutrition of every child in this country. Thank you, Mr. President.
Mr. President, I recognize to co-sponsor the measure Senator Bamakino and then Senator Mig Subiri, and then I will move to the approval. 13 na sila co-sponsor, Mr. President. So, Senator...
Thank you, Majority Floor Leader.
Senator Aquino is recognized.
Just very quickly, Mr. President, firstly, I'd like to seek the permission of the sponsor and author, if I may be also a co-author to this measure. And secondly, just to show my support and to manifest my support to this bill. Sa totoo lang, Mr. President, this is a complementary measure to one of the bills which is in our agenda, which is the feeding program bill, also known as the Pagkain Pinoy para sa Batang Pinoy bill, which of course is very close to Senator Grace's heart and to my heart. And we're hoping, Mr. President, that when we do pass the Pagkain Pinoy para sa Batang Pinoy bill, and we pass this, that will indeed be the biggest action against malnutrition in our country, because then we would have passed a bill or two complementary bills that won't only take care of your first 1,000 days, but even more importantly, all the way until grade 2 or grade 6, depending on the amendments to come, Mr. President. So I think those two complementary bills will be very important in this drive against hunger and malnutrition in our country. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Senator Subiri is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, just a 2-minute manifestation. With the permission also of the author, if I could be made a co-author of the said measure. As mentioned by the Senate Majority Leader, we have majority approval already. Hopefully this will not take long to go through the second and third reading period of the Senate. But my question now, Mr. President, maybe at the appropriate time, when the author could answer some questions during the interpellation, I'd like to seek guidance of government policy towards, because as Vice Chairman of the Philippine Red Cross, and my chairman is right beside me, when we had my last trip to Baloi in Llano del Sur, Llano del Norte, when we gave out relief goods, the people were asking for milk for their children. You know, the problem is the DOH has a policy wherein they will not allow the giving of powdered milk. So many companies want to donate powdered milk, Bear Brand and all that. You know, I had to buy on my own I had to buy, and my staff had to distribute it because the DOH officials did not want to distribute it. And I think it is frustrating on our part. You know, in times of stress, we all have wives, Your Honor, we all have children. Most of us have children, except for Senator Gatchalian, unless he asks that he does not tell us. But, Your Honor, we all know that if the wives are stressed, if your mothers are stressed, sometimes they cannot produce milk. And I was so saddened to see many teenage pregnant mothers in the rescue centers that are begging for milk, but the DOH does not want to give them milk. And that is a problem. Maybe we can also address this, because malnourished, you know, malnutrition can be solved many ways. But we have to open our minds sometimes on how we can solve this issue, Your Honor. So I just want to put that on record, because this has happened to me 2 weeks or 3 weeks ago, and I know this is a recurring problem with Senator Gordon about the problem of giving out milk to these children that's not mother's milk. I hope we can how do you say, educate, or maybe we can be educated by the DOH why they do not do that, Your Honor, Mr. President. Thank you.
Thank you. Majority Leader.
Senator Dick Gordon, Mr. President.
Senator Gordon is recognized.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you very much, Mr. President. I fully support the bill and express my desire to be co-author of this bill. Okay. And I'd like to join my distinguished colleague, Senator Zubiri. Let me just point out, at this moment, I have so many people who want to contribute powdered milk, substitute milk for the moment. Now, let me underscore this. I am a key promoter of mother's milk. I grew up on mother's milk, and this is a policy that I heartfully and thoroughly support. But in times of emergency, hirap na hirap yung mga tao doon sa Marawi, naghahanap ng gatas yung mga bata. Di tayo makakuha ng gatas, nagbibigay. I have to write letters to the Department of Health to allow them to allow Nestle, all these other companies to provide milk. Now, obviously, hindi makapag-lactate yung ibang mothers doon. I know we provide them with lactating rooms, etc., so that they could provide for them. But in this particular case, that's my reservation also, Mr. Chairman and Mr. President. And therefore, I just want to express that here so that everybody would be aware of that situation, like Senator Zubiri has succinctly put it. Thank you very much.
Majority Leader.
Mr. President, Senator Gatchalian to co-sponsor the measure.
Senator Gatchalian is recognized.
Mr. President, I just want to manifest my intention to be a co-author of the 3 bills that were sponsored today: Senate Bill number 1533, Senate Bill number 1534, and lastly, Senate Bill 1537, which is being discussed right now. Mr. President, thank you.
Thank you.
One of the principal sponsors wishes to be recognized again, Mr. President.
To respond, yes, Senator Ontiveros.
Salamat po, Mr. President. I promise very briefly, pero kaugnay po nung mga importanteng tanong ng good gentlemen from Bukidnon and Zambales respectively, kaugnay po ng drive ng Department of Health at ng National Nutrition Council na i-sustain pa rin yung nakapaloob sa executive order on the breast milk code at yung legislative effort pa rin natin na magsabatas ng isang gold standard on exclusive breastfeeding in the first 6 months of life at saka supplemental or mixed feeding from the 7th month of life until 2 years of age of the babies. At syempre po, alam po natin bilang mga Pilipino kung ganong ka-challenging ito sa mga especially difficult circumstances, lalo na sa isang sitwasyon halimbawa ng armadong labanan or isang humanitarian crisis. Pero may mga pamamaraan po, Mr. President, that the DOH and the NNC have implemented on the ground at nakapaloob po dito sa ating Healthy Nanay, Healthy Bulilit Act. And without going further at this point in time, Mr. President, kasi we will do justice to their very valid questions sa interpellation period, gaya ni sinabi ni Majority Leader. Pero meron din pong mga kahirapan na mag-bottle feeding, breast milk substitute feeding in evacuation centers. So I will still make a very strong pitch po para sa pag-sustene nung drive ng DOH at NNC kaugnay ng breastfeeding. Salamat po, Mr. President.
Mr. President, as I manifested earlier, Senator Nancy Binay will deliver a co-sponsorship speech on Monday. And the only thing preventing me from filing a motion to approve on second reading the bill, because of the number of co-sponsors, is the tradition in the Senate that we don't pass a bill on second reading on the day it was sponsored, Mr. President. Therefore, I move to suspend consideration of Senate Bill 1537 under Committee Report 145 so that the 4 or 5 members of the Senate can study the measure.
Before I act on your motion,
hindi ko sponsor
I want to inform our colleagues that Senator Poe mentioned the list of priorities. This is an evolving list. This list can grow with an addition of measures, and what I have noticed now is by direct action of the senators, this bill, this measure, will be in that priority list.
Yes.
We have no choice. Direct action of the senator. So, is there any objection to the motion to suspend consideration? Hearing none, motion is approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. Before the final sponsorship for today, I move to proceed with the second additional reference of business.
Any objection? Hearing none, motion is approved. Secretary, please.
Second additional reference of business, committee report number 146, prepared and submitted by the Committee on Foreign Relations on proposed Senate resolution number 454 entitled Resolution Concurring in the Ratification of the Convention Concerning Protection of the Right to Organize and Procedures for Determining Conditions of Employment in the Public Service, recommending its approval without amendment, Senators Ligarda and Villanueva.
To the calendar for ordinary business.
Mr. President, I move to transfer from the calendar for ordinary business to the calendar for special orders. PS Resolution 454 under Committee Report 146.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
I move to consider PS Resolution 454 under Committee Report 146.
Any objection? Hearing none, we are now considering PS Resolution number 454 under Committee Report number 146.
May we ask Secretary to read the title of the resolution?
Secretary, please do so.
Resolution concurring in the ratification of the Convention concerning protection of the right to organize and procedures for determining conditions of employment in the public service.
Mr. President, may I move to recognize the Chairman of the Committee on Foreign Relations, Senator Lauren Legarda, to sponsor the measure.
Senator Legarda is recognized to sponsor the measure.
Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, for a well-functioning and stable government, the attainment of our desired sustainable development goals, and a just, peaceful, prosperous, and thriving society, it is indispensable for our country to have a public service with strong and effective civil servants and public employees. That is why it is my honor today to seek your concurrence to the ratification of ILO Labor Relations Convention 151 concerning the protection of the right to organize and procedures for determining conditions of employment in the public service, otherwise known as ILO 151. Who are covered by this convention? They are all persons employed by public authorities, civil servants employed in the national government agencies, its attached agencies, bureaus, local government units, and government-owned and controlled corporations. Our 2.3 million civil servants are unsung heroes. Their contribution to the security and safety of our nation, the protection of our democracy and our way of life, the smooth running of government, and ensuring a robust economy and expansion of trade, education of our youth, and the pursuit of our common ideals as a nation is incalculable. Yet compared to the workers in the private sector, they have less opportunities to negotiate terms and conditions of employment, among other rights which are available to the private sector and other workers, leading to an unequal situation. And we need to address this inequality. Mr. President, ILO Convention 151, Labor Relations Convention 1978, was adopted on June 27, 1978, during the 64th session of the International Labor Conference, or the ILC. It entered into force in 1981. 53 states to date have already ratified the convention. So if you will count the years, from 1978 to 2017. That's almost 40 years. President Rodrigo Roa Duterte signed ILO 151 on May 26, 2017, making the first step towards Philippine ratification. Let it be said that it was not lying in the archives in the Senate. It was never transmitted by the executive because the Philippines had not yet ratified it before May of 2017. If the Philippines completes the ratification process today, upon the concurrence of the Senate, we will have the distinction of being the first Asian country to do so. The rights of public sector employees are specified in the Convention as 5 types of guarantees: protection of the right to organize, facilities to be afforded to public employees' organizations, procedures for determining terms and conditions of employment, settlement of disputes arising in connection with the determination of terms and conditions of employment, and civil and political rights. The Convention guarantees the right of public employees to organize, provides adequate protection against acts of anti-union discrimination, and mandates the public employees' organizations shall enjoy complete independence from public authorities. Under this convention, public employees shall have the same civil and political rights as other workers, which are essential to the exercise of the freedom of association. As an employer, the government shall provide facilities to the representatives of recognized public employees organizations to enable them to carry out their functions promptly and efficiently, both during and outside their hours of work, without impairing the efficient operation of the office. Measures appropriate to national conditions shall encourage and promote the full development and utilization of machinery for negotiation of terms and conditions of employment between the public authorities concerned and public employees' organizations, or of such methods as will allow representatives of public employees to participate in the determination of these matters. The settlement of disputes arising in connection with the determination of terms and conditions of employment shall be sought, as may be appropriate, through negotiation between the parties or through independent and impartial machinery such as mediation, conciliation, and arbitration. Mr. President, why is there a need to concur with the ratification? It goes for these following reasons. First, the Philippines is a signatory to ILO 87 on the freedom of association, ILO 98 on collective bargaining. Several observations have repeatedly noted that the rights under these conventions are limited to the private sector. ILO 151 addresses a gap in international law and affords protection for the millions of employees employed by public authorities of the ratifying countries all over the world. Second, the ratification and concurrence of ILO 151 is the Philippine government's commitment to its civil servants since it's included in the Philippine Labor and Employment Plan 2011 to 2016. Third, there is a clamor for its ratification and concurrence from 2.3 million civil servants and their families. This convention is important to them. They will enjoy better working conditions, have the opportunity to negotiate the terms and conditions of their employment, and have proper avenues to voice out their grievances. Fourth, the concurrence to the ratification of the convention will be an important measure to support the fight against graft and corruption, as better terms and conditions of employment will motivate against Graft and Corrupt Practices Act. The new mechanisms against graft and corruption, suggested and supported by the public employees organizations, are also a likely result of dialogue and negotiation. Fifth, being the first country in Asia to ratify the convention, this will bolster the domestic and international status of the Philippines as a leader in promoting and protecting labor and civil rights. Civil servants have waited for 39 long years for the ratification of this convention. The Senate's concurrence is a vote in upholding and promoting their labor rights. Let us immediately, without question, without much debate, concur with its ratification now. It was then Executive Secretary Franklin Drilon, now Minority Leader, who issued Executive Order 180 that encapsulated much of what is contained in this ILO Convention, and the minority is in full support of the concurrence in the ratification of this agreement. Senator Joel Villanueva also requested the sponsor to hear this today, as it is also one of his most fervent advocacies, and wished that it be heard, debated, sponsored, no debate, and passed unanimously by this chamber today. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. President. It is not unlawful to dream. But this will be co-sponsored by the chairman of the Committee on Labor, Senator Villanueva, and then Senator Manny Pacquiao and Senator Risa Ontiveros.
Today. They'll give the speeches today. Okay, Senator Villanueva is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Majority Floor Leader. Thank you, Mr. President. Magandang hapon po sa ating lahat. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, it is my distinct honor and privilege to co-sponsor with the good Senator Lauren Legarda, Chair of the Committee on Foreign Relations, an international treaty that will finally give adequate protection to the country's 2.3 million civil servants, specifically against acts of anti-union discrimination in respect of their employment. Your Committee on Labor and Human Resources strongly endorse that the Senate concur with the ratification of International Labor Organization Convention 151 concerning protection of the right to organize and procedures for determining conditions of employment in the public service. Sa mahabang panahon po natin, medyo mahabang panahon, Mr. President, sa panunungkulan po natin sa gobyerno, saksi po ako sa kabayanihan at kagandahang loob ng ating mga lingkod bayan, lalo na po yung mga nasa mababang hanay. Dahil sa mga kawani ng gobyerno, tuloy-tuloy po ang serbisyo publiko. Sa kabila po nito, at ang nakakalungkot, Mr. President, makupad at tiwali pa rin ang tingin sa marami nating mga kababayan na nagtatrabaho sa gobyerno. While we often learn about corrupt activities and inefficiencies of some people in government, I firmly believe, Mr. President, that this is only a small % of the bureaucracy. Unfortunately, it is sometimes easy for some to generalize because of the so-called bad eggs. Today, Mr. President, we wish to address the environment which produced these bad eggs and honor the great majority for their hard work. Our concurrence to ILO Convention 151 is our fitting recognition to them and to the people they dutifully serve. Mr. President, ILO Convention 151 is also a very good addition to ILO conventions that the Philippine government has already concurred in, such as the ILO Convention 87 on freedom of association, ILO Convention 98 on the right to organize and collectively bargain, and ILO Convention 144 concerning tripartite consultation. It likewise complements Executive Order 180, serving as a model in improving labor relations in government. Malaking papel po, Mr. President, ang ginagampanan ng ating mga kawani ng gobyerno sa pagtupad ng ambisyon natin 2040. Kasama sila sa pagtupad ng pangarap ng bawat Pilipino. But for civil servants to be effective partners in development, they must be armed with the rights to collective bargaining and negotiation. They must have a say in workplace issues and conditions. Currently, they hardly have these rights and the space to express their voices. In fact, as of January 2015, Mr. President, data from civil service indicate that of the 1,944 registered unions in the public sector, only 992 or less than half have achieved accreditation status, while only 813 have collective negotiation agreements. Today, Mr. President, the Senate is given a chance to finally address these challenges. 39 years after ILO Convention 151 entered into force and nearly 8 years of staunch advocacy by our public sector unions. By concurring in the ratification of ILO Convention 151, we provide the legal framework and guarantees which our civil servants must enjoy if we are to honor their service to the nation. These guarantees are: 1, protection of the right to organize, facilities to be afforded to public employees organizations, procedures for determining terms and conditions of employment, settlement of disputes arising in connection with the determination of terms and conditions of employment, and civil and political rights. Mr. President, our concurrence to ILO Convention 151 is not an end in itself. It is merely continuing our avowed commitment to address corruption and improve the delivery of basic services in the long term. A vibrant collective bargaining in the public sector encourages workers to design their standards and codes of conduct or even whistleblower mechanisms in preventing corruption. Alam ko po na magkakasama tayong lahat dito, Mr. President, sa paniniwala na kung patitibayin po ang karapatan ng mga kawani ng gobyerno at palalakasin ang kanilang boses, aangat ang kalidad ng serbisyo publiko. Tunay po ang mamamayang Pilipino ang makikinabang sa ILO Convention 151. Mr. President, members of the Senate, let us make history today by being the first country in the Asia-Pacific to concur in the ratification of ILO Convention 151. Maraming salamat po.
Senator Manny Pacquiao, Mr. President.
Senator Pacquiao is recognized. Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, we cannot overemphasize the role of civil servants in nation building. On May 26, 2017, President Rodrigo Roa Duterte ratified an International Labor Organization Convention which is highly beneficial to our civil servants. We are one with him in recognizing the need for public employees in our country to enjoy adequate protection against acts of anti-union discrimination in respect of their employment. With this, I would like to put on record that as a Vice Chairman of the Committee on Foreign Relations, I fully support the Senate concurrence on the Convention concerning protection of the right to organize and procedures for determining conditions of employment in the public service. With our all-out support, Mr. President, we are making history as the first country in Asia to ratify ILO Convention 151. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Risa Ontiveros.
Senator Ontiveros is recognized.
Salamat po, Mr. President. Together with the public sector unions affiliated with Public Service International, Trade Union Rights, Philippines, Nagkaisa Labor Coalition, and Centro Publico, I thank Chairwoman Lauren Legarda for taking the lead in the ratification process of International Labor Organization Convention 151 concerning the protection of the rights and employment of public sector workers. Our colleagues in the public service have been hoping and campaigning for its ratification since 1978. Once ratified by the Senate, we will be the 54th signatory to the convention and will take pride in being the first government in the Asia-Pacific region to do so. ILO Convention 151 reiterates our commitment to provide safeguards for the right to freedom of association, collective bargaining of employees in the public sector, granting of privileges and facilities to public sector unions, mechanisms for settlement of disputes, and promotion of civil and political rights. ILO Convention 151 does not only guarantee decent work and trade union rights for 1.4 million public sector employees, it is also a tool of good governance. As in most cases, civil servants who are empowered to organize and have a say in their working conditions tend to be more supportive of anti-corruption efforts and to enhance and deliver quality public service in the country. In a month's time, Mr. President, we will be commemorating the 117th Philippine Civil Service Anniversary. Let's make this celebration of our colleagues in the public service more meaningful by ratifying ILO Convention 151. Sa ratifikasyon ng ILO Convention 151, Mr. President, hindi lamang natin kinikilala ang pangangailangan para sa disenteng trabaho ng manggagawa sa gobyerno, kung hindi sinisigurado rin nating panalo ang mamamayan sa dekalidad na pampublikong serbisyo at mabuting paggogobyerno. Maraming salamat po, Mr. President, at mabuhay mga kasama.
Mr. President, to give time to the other members to study the proposed measure, I move that we suspend consideration of PS Resolution 454 under Committee Report 146.
Is there any objection?
Yes,
Senator
Mr.
Regarda.
President, Senator Regarda perhaps wishes it to be taken up because it's only a resolution, but you need 16 votes. You don't have 16. That's the reason I'm suspending already. The minority leader and I already talked about it.
Even for second reading?
Yeah, for second reading. Yeah, and this is not the, because this measure takes second reading and third reading, it is considered a regular bill, and therefore the tradition of the Senate has never been to pass any measure on the same day when it is sponsored. So my motion is to
There's no
suspend
objection,
consideration,
yeah.
Mr. President.
If there is no objection, we will process the pending motion. Is there any objection that we suspend consideration? Okay, so hearing none. Okay, Senator Ontiveros.
Mr. President, parliamentary inquiry, meron po bang ibang mga kasapi ng Senado na maaaring nasa lounge o nasa mga opisina na pwede natin imbitahin bumaba sa floor para kung may 16?
Majority Leader, can we suspend?
Mr. President, may I seek clarification? Yes, I have advice from the COMSEC that for approval on second reading, we would need 13 votes, not yet 16. May I seek the wisdom of the chair, of the presiding officer on this rule?
That's technically correct, but the spirit, I see the spirit of the statement of the majority leader that anyway, or at any rate, we will be needing 16 at the end of the day. So it's better that we already have that number when we approve it on second reading.
In which case, Mr. President, may I return to my first question, if there are perhaps 16 members of the chamber on the floor plus in the lounge and maybe in their offices? Mr. President?
Mr. President, before you suspend, may I remind again the members of the Senate of the tradition in the Senate. Sometimes tradition are never suspended. Rules are suspended, but tradition are never. And the tradition in the Senate is we never pass a measure on second reading on the day it is sponsored, unless it's the last day of the session. That was the only time that it happened in the past. It has never happened. Why will we do it now? We can pass this on Monday. What is so important about it that we need to pass it on second reading over the weekend? If they can convince me why, then let's break tradition, if that is what the majority wants. But I will object. Thank you, Mr. President.
Okay, so the pending motion now is suspend consideration. Any objection? Hearing none, the motion is approved. Majority Leader? Session is suspended.
Kaya ako gusto ko
ba siya Session is resumed. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. I call for the previous question. To suspend the measure.
It's already,
Already suspended.
already been acted upon, yes, sir.
Then, Mr. President, I move to resume consideration of Senate Bill 1399 under Committee Report number 58.
Any objection? Hearing none, the motion is approved.
Mr. President, this is the measure on the Police Court Act of 2017. The parliamentary status of the measure is that we are now in the period of interpellation. So may we recognize the sponsor, the chairman of the Committee on Justice and Human Rights, Senator Richard Gordon, and to interpellate the Minority Leader, Senator Franklin Drilon.
Senator Gordon, the sponsor, is recognized, and to interpellate the Minority Leader, Senator Drilon.
Oh, ano ito? What is this?
We don't need the screens. We don't need the PowerPoint. This is interpellation. Lights, please. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Mr. President. Will the gentleman from Olongapo, the sponsor of the measure, yield the floor to a few clarificatory questions?
Willingly and always, Your Honor. Thank you very much.
Mr. President, we have no basic objection to the measure creating police law enforcement courts. There are just two areas of concern that we wish to bring to the attention of this chamber and the good sponsor. The first issue is jurisdiction. Under Section 3 of the proposed measure, it reads, establishment of police law enforcement, police law enforcement court or police court and appellate police law enforcement court, appellate police court. It reads, The Supreme Court shall create a special court designated as the Police Law Enforcement Court, parenthesis, Police Court, parenthesis, among the existing regional trial courts, which shall handle all civil and criminal cases involving the abuse of authority, whether in or off duty, of the members of the Philippine National Police, including civil and criminal cases arising out of the violation of a member of the Philippine National Police of its PNP operational procedure and other police protocols designed to protect the rights of the accused. Further, then continuing, the Supreme Court shall likewise designate the appellate's police court from among the divisions of the Court of Appeals that shall handle all appeals from the police courts and appeals over the decisions resolution of the National Police Commission in administrative cases. Mr. President, under existing laws, violations of the Anti-Graft Act and the Book 2 of the Revised Penal Code, where one or more of the accused occupies positions, whether in acting or permanent capacity, of regional director or higher, classified as grade 27 or higher, shall be tried in the Sandigan Bayan. Now, this provision says all cases involving members of the Philippine National Police shall now be tried by the regional trial courts. Are we amending the Sandigan Bayan Act?
Yes, Your Honor, because that applies to senior superintendents and above that will be recognized by the Sandigan Bayan.
I'm sorry, Mr. Sponsor?
Any policeman with the grade of senior superintendent and above, they automatically go to the Sandigan Bayan. We would like to bring that to the regional trial court so that isa na lang ang pupuntahan.
We believe that there is merit in continuing with the present setup, wherein the regional directors and higher, classified as grade 27, should remain with the Sandigan Bayan because they are entitled to a collegial body given the rank. We regret that we have very serious reservations about removing the jurisdiction of the Sandigan insofar as these officers are concerned. There is no reason rational, we cannot see the rationale for such a revision of the jurisdiction, Mr. President.
With all due respect, and I appreciate the comments, we have looked at that, but the committee would like to think that the concentration of a particular police offense, for example, it occurs in one jurisdiction, can be handled very, very fast or faster with it being covered by the regional trial court. Sandigan Bayan has so many cases in its agenda, and the idea here is expeditiousness and justice. As they say, justice delayed is justice denied. And because of the prevailing situation today, where a few policemen create dastardly offenses at the expense of the whole police force and at the expense of the general public, creates lack of credibility or creates disrespect or mistrust. We thought it best that the thrust of this should go into a faster mode. That's why we would like specialized court within the jurisdiction, within the province where the offense was committed, so that there would be no difficulties for witnesses or, for that matter, the populace who are affected by the abuse, Your Honor.
We regret that we cannot subscribe to that view, Mr. President, with all due respect, because precisely given the rank of those police officers whose offenses will be tried by the Sandigan will precisely give them that security of fairness, because you have three brains, if I may say, that would look at the case and therefore would decide on the matter. The matter of expediency, we have created, I think, 2 additional courts in the Sandigan, and we believe that the matter of the delays is being addressed. In fact, the law that we passed would, sponsored then by the Senate President now, would revise the procedure to expedite resolution of cases in the Sandigan Bayan, including the number of judges that would concur in the decision in order to arrive at judgment of the court. So we believe that the issue of the delay has been adequately addressed under the present existing laws. So we make this plea to the sponsor that in order to, we can expedite the passage of this, but we believe that we should maintain the present jurisdiction of the Sandigan Bayan.
Your Honor, under these provisions that we enshrined here, any crime committed by even a regional director ultimately will go to the regional, to the appellate court, Your Honor, a police appellate court that will be created. So the concern that there will be less eyes or less minds to take a look at it is obviated by the fact that it will go to the regional appellate court or to the Court of Appeals, specializing on police violations, Your Honor. We just want to make this plea, principally because, as you know, we are practically bamboozled, especially nowadays, by senior ranking officers who appear to be getting away with it, by the Secretary of Justice intervening in the, I would say, tendency to intervene in the functions of the courts by reducing, for example, the offense, or for that matter, IAS giving them the right, giving them the excuse to take it out of the purview of bail, Your Honor, by making it a lesser offense. And that is why I think the closer the courts are to the people means that people have more access to the courts in their province. And the closer they are will mean that there will be more availability of witnesses who might help somebody who has been abused, who may have been killed, or his family are crying for justice right there. To go to the Sandigan Bayan is a major chore, Mr. President, and that is why you hardly hear of regional directors being prosecuted. I still have to remember a case where a regional police senior superintendent or chief superintendent have been prosecuted. In fact, if memory serves correct, the President has said there are 5 police generals that are involved in drugs, and yet, voila, there is no prosecution, there is no effort to try and pry out the kind of warrants that is within these offices. And that is why I think it is important that if there is a scandalous behavior, rank abuse, I think the community has the right to remove. Besides, Your Honor, in the plebs, for example, any general who, in the old days it was called general, who makes an abuse, even the plebs can remove the general if the crime was committed in the locality where the plebs is holding a court or office. And that is why we're just being consistent. I think basically I'm reacting as a mayor, a former mayor, as an executive, knowing the plight of people having to go to a battle with a very, very large bureaucracy. The PNP itself is a formidable bureaucracy, Your Honor. And I remember when I was at the Constitutional Convention, I was against the creation of a PNP because once somebody gets corrupt in the PNP, the whole thing gets corrupt, and it's very hard to battle with a gargantuan bureaucracy where you have to go through, for example, in the case of Central Luzon, you have to go to the provincial, and then you have to go to Camp Olivas just to complain in Region 3 to complain about an officer. Here we want to bring it down to the level of the people, the regional trial court, so that no matter how high you are, if you commit a crime right there in the region or in the locality they're at, the people find strength to go after it. Besides, Your Honor, it is not the rank that confers them entitlement. Leadership, after all, is action. It is not position. Many of our, even senators, even congressmen, even generals, they abuse their prerogatives just because they are called generals, Your Honor. And that's why I thought I'd bring it down to the level of the mass, a little closer to the level of the mass. Anyway, when they appeal, it's going to go to the appellate court of the Court of Appeals. And it's not just a matter of having the Sandigan, more Sandigan Bayan. The point is we want focus on a particular offense involving policemen that have been, and there's been a rank tendency to use the Cabarro system to get away with it, or for that matter, when he's a general, he's so influential, other people within the department or within the national police system are afraid to touch him, Your Honor.
Mr. President, under the present system, a decision of the Sandigan Bayan can only be appealed to the Supreme Court if my recollection of the law is correct, so that it is more expeditious insofar as the present appeal process is concerned, because it doesn't anymore go to the Court of Appeals insofar as the regional directors of the PNP is concerned. The other realistic issue, Mr. President, is, when you have a regional director being tried in the RTC and in the provinces, the fear factor is there. General po yung kaharap natin sa probinsya. That is the reality. And that is the concern that I think cannot be denied under our present-day circumstances. That's the reason why we believe that there is rationale in, yes, allowing the present Sandigan Bayan to continue with its jurisdiction, and all those who are below grade 27, yes, should be tried in the regional trial court where the offense happened. I don't see why that should be revised at this point.
Your Honor, again with respect, and everybody knows that the gentleman from Iloilo has been a long-time colleague of mine, not only here but in the law firm and in UP. And I have the greatest respect for his legal acumen and his expertise and experience, being a former executive secretary as well, and Secretary of Justice. But I dare say, however, from the standpoint of the local point of view, that precisely we want to slay that image that just because he's a general, he cannot be brought down to the level right there where people who know him realize that he can be prosecuted under the local court, Your Honor. That will give more strength for people, especially if they're backed up by the community, getting that general to have a case filed right there where the crime was committed, along with his subordinates. And that's another issue that I want to get into. Sometimes the subordinates may have been ordered by that general. So what happens now? Are we going to bring all the subordinates to the Sandigan Bayan? Or are we going to try them all in the local, the regional trial court, so that later on, if there should be any appeal, they can go to the Court of Appeals? To my mind, I'd like to give strength to the people more. I am not going to second guess the people that they would be afraid. Precisely, this country is afraid because we have not practiced courage. We have not practiced the ability to tell our people na may laban sila kahit na malaki, lalo na kung kasama nila ang mamamayan, kung talagang may dastar the act. Take the case of Parahinog, right there in his own hometown. You and I have talked about this. Warrants are issued, search warrants, 2:30 in the morning. You don't know who issued it. You don't know who's the leading policeman out there. and they remove all the police and they bring in another group of people, and they come in and barge in at 2:30 in the morning, and there are two sides to it, and I don't want to say it both sides because I don't want to prejudge it. It might go into the Committee on Justice. But the point is, when you find out that later on it can go to the very top, it can go to the regional directors above grade 27, are we just going to fold our hands and say, well, wala tayong magawa, masyadong malaki yan? Or if you're going to go to the Sandigan Bayan, where you will need higher grade lawyers, if you will, to assist these local folks. And I'm not just talking about that. For all you know, the Parohinics may have been guilty in the past of many dastardly cases, and I'm not going to judge that. I just want to say the community has the right, because their peace has been destroyed, has been abused by a high-ranking official who now says, oh, you cannot touch me. You have to catch me in the Sandigan Bayan. And I'd like him touched right there in the local government, in the local area where he belongs. I argue passionately because I know how it feels, Your Honor. You know, I had to go to the CIS, the NBI, when my father was killed. And nobody seemed to be responsible for it. And everybody was, you know, confusing us. Who do we run to? Especially when we ran against the regional, one of the regional officers at that time, General Diaz, was one of the people who said it was a hoax in the earlier times. And that instead of cowering in fear, that gave me courage that I maintain until now. If you may call it courage, takot ako pero hindi ako duwag na lalaban niya sa malalaki, because it is important that we bring them down to size right there in their own home turf. Not in Sandigan Bayan, where they can be protected by the mighty in the PNP or the mighty in the local government, or in the mighty even to the highest office of the land, Your Honor.
Well, all right. The other issue in relation to this is what will be the role of the ombudsman in cases that are filed in the regional trial courts against policemen?
Well, for abuses involving graft, or for that matter, and I submit you can have graft even if you commit bribery or whatever, that is already a criminal case that can be recognized by the local regional trial court, Your Honor. But certainly to go to the ombudsman is again a big chore. I would prefer that it be handled in the local regional trial court instead of the ombudsman. Because as you know, cases in the ombudsman, our own colleague here has been waiting in suspense, and the case have been filed, and only now, lalabas bigla yung ombudsman, tagal-tagal, tapos mamaya baka wala rin mangyari, di ba? But we're not in the area of speculation. We just want to make sure that we can have an expeditious, fast, speedy, and just trial, just in case we know and pinpoint to the mass. And most of the problem in these laws all the time is the failure to inform the public that they have access to the lower court, so that justice can be done safely, speedily, and not hastily, Your Honor.
Yes, but the issue that is in my mind is the jurisdiction of the ombudsman as defined by law. The ombudsman will be deprived of jurisdiction on cases which are now tried by the regional trial court. That's a question of jurisdiction and what the law is right now.
That is why we are discussing it in the Senate, and we will have to decide whether we want to go that route or go the other route. It will have to be discussed by us and voted on by us in accordance with the debates that we are conducting. We hope that our debates can enlighten our colleagues here to go into the right vote. I'm not going to say that I have the franchise on correctness, or neither am I willing to concede that the other colleagues have the franchise on correctness. But it is good. The Senate is a debating place. It's a place where we argue to get better law, and that's why I think I accept, and I don't think I accept all the comments of my distinguished colleague from Iloilo, so that it can enlighten us. Perhaps you can find
I
a
am
way
just
clear.
raising a question of jurisdiction. I'm not making any comment, Mr. President.
Well, I just answered, Your Honor, that I would prefer that it be in the RTC, but then that is just my comment, Your Honor, as author, because I am reacting to the many cases of extrajudicial killings, and this is part of the package in addressing the extrajudicial killings in this country, instead of just barking in the night or saying things that we do not want. I'm trying to come up with something positive, and I would like to ask the help of our colleagues here, particularly our distinguished colleague from Iloilo, who can help us. Besides, Your Honor, under Section 6, it says, prosecutors to the police courts. The Department of Justice shall assign prosecutors to prosecute cases within the jurisdiction of the police courts. It shall provide for a mechanism to ensure the speedy resolution of preliminary investigations within 30 days from the receipt of the complaint. Besides, Your Honor, I understand that starting September, the Supreme Court is issuing rules that will now allow continuous hearing of cases, something that this representation has been advocating since I was a young mayor of Olongapo, where I was even castigated by Chief Justice Fernando for interfering in the functions of the judiciary when I tried to put in everybody, the mayor, the police, the judiciary, the judges, and the fiscal to try and engage in continuous hearing of cases. And that's why, with the continuous hearing of cases and the Justice Secretary assigning prosecutors that must go and finish this case within 30 days, I think we can relieve the Ombudsman of this task, because at times the Ombudsman works very slowly. Your Honor, I filed a case in the Ombudsman, and I know that they're overloaded, and I filed it last year, and up to now it has not moved, Your Honor. And it's a very rank case of graft and corruption, at least from my point of view. And if I may be allowed, a big mall took over the city park of Olongapo City, and you know, there were allegations that the city councilors were bribed, and even have a councilor who put it out. And yet, up to now, we have not been able to get anything from the Ombudsman. The Ombudsman can investigate. I'm not saying that they cannot, and the Ombudsman can even act as a prosecutor, if need be, Your Honor, if it goes to the higher court, if that is the case, Your Honor.
Mr. President, under the Constitution, the Ombudsman has authority to act on all complaints. Now, under Section 6, it is deprived of that prerogative under the Constitution, because it is now the Secretary of Justice who shall assign prosecutors to prosecute cases. This is an issue which has to be examined closely, because of the jurisdiction of the Ombudsman is affected here. The Ombudsman has primary jurisdiction, and that is something that we must resolve here. And this jurisdiction of the Ombudsman is in fact recognized by the Department of Justice, because they entered into memorandum of agreement, which would enable the prosecutors to prosecute anti-graft cases upon the concurrence of the Ombudsman for the Department of Justice to hear these cases. So this is a jurisdiction of the Ombudsman, the primary jurisdiction of the Ombudsman, which we are trying to analyze and put and reflect in the law. I think it's at this point we must be conscious, or we're just raising this jurisdictional issue because we believe that it is something that cannot be ignored and cannot be violated, and is being violated by Section 6.
Your Honor, I agree up to a point. I think we can find our way clear and maybe make it concurrent. But on the other hand, also under Section 13, paragraph 1, 2, and 3 of the 1987 Constitution, Ombudsman can have concurrent jurisdiction. In fact, the Ombudsman can direct appropriate prosecuting attorneys to file cases against errant public officers who are committing graft, Your Honor.
Yeah, but under the Section 6, that power of the ombudsman is no longer recognized because it is the exclusive prerogative of the Department of Justice to designate a prosecutor.
We can make proper amendments to that effect, Your Honor, to make it a concurrent power, Your Honor.
Well,
and I would seek your help on that one. After all, the end here is to try and facilitate the cases, not a question of just who is going to take charge, but it's important. No. But it can be done, I believe, Your Honor.
Mr. President, I think the Department of Justice has no jurisdiction to designate prosecutors. It is the ombudsman who would have that authority to deputize the prosecutors of the Department of Justice as it presently is practiced.
Well, like I said, this representation is willing to find our way clear. If that is the view of the Senate, then we can accept that as an amendment. If that is possible, we can make the ombudsman designate the prosecutors, especially for the police. Maybe the ombudsman can be, we can amend here that the ombudsman can designate police prosecutors within the ombudsman to make it even faster. Would the gentleman be happy about that?
Yes, that would be consistent with the jurisdiction of the ombudsman. In other words, it is the ombudsman who has control, not the Department of Justice.
Then we commit, Your Honor, to make the proper amendment to that effect so that we can pass this law to the legal satisfaction and acceptance under the Constitution. Of course, I'm being given notes here, and without benefit of researching it myself, the Secretary of Justice, according to my staff, has concurrent jurisdiction with the Ombudsman. But I will go by that. I will go with the Ombudsman.
The concurrent jurisdiction is because of the memorandum of agreement signed between the Secretary of Justice and the Ombudsman.
That's correct, Your Honor. Yeah. So, again, like I said, I'm willing, and I'm willing to live with that. The Ombudsman is something that I pushed during the Constitutional Convention of 1971, and we have to trust somebody, and I prefer the Ombudsman, especially when the President appoints the Secretary of Justice who is coterminous to his term. And I would much prefer, and I bow to the wisdom of the gentleman, to allow the Ombudsman to appoint the special police prosecutors in that regard.
Well, I guess the only issue that we do not have an agreement on, Mr. President, is the issue of the jurisdiction over police officers with a grade 27 and higher. And we will continue to research on that further to see what kind of compromise or language we can use in order that we can maintain the present jurisdiction of the Sandigan Bayan. So we reserve our right to go back to that at a future session.
And we're ready to accept an amendment that we find will eventually lead to the common good, to the objective of making sure that we can take a bite out of many cases of abuse by sometimes just a few policemen who get away with it. And that's why they get to repeat it many times, Your Honor.
The other issue that I would like to raise, Mr. President, is the use of income.
Use of?
Income, on page 5, section 12.
10%.
The Supreme Court shall be allowed to use 10% of the income derived from filing and other court fees under Rule 141 of the Rules of Court for research and other operating expenses, including capital outlay. First, how much is this, Mr. President?
Excuse me?
How much is this 10%? The first question, Mr. President, this is not in the original bill that was filed. This is included in the committee, only included in the committee report. Is that
upon
correct?
Consultation with the Supreme Court, Your Honor.
How much is 10% of the fees?
Just a minute, Your Honor.
Sure. Hmm? Read, what is this?
Session suspended.
No, but this is, it's general.
So we can dispense with it. Ready na? Okay.
Does that section even make sense?
Huh?
Beside the section, does it make sense?
Which one?
Yeah, does it really make sense? Does it make
Use
sense?
of income?
Tapos ano ba ito?
Huh?
Kaya lang yan.
Session is resumed.
Thank you, Your Honor. If I may proceed. Your Honor, I ask you to the distinguished gentleman, the 10% will go to the, as provided for in the law, the training of judges on this new initiative, the training of the prosecuting officers, maybe some computers, if you will, some equipment, and anyway, the Supreme Court, because this will be all under the Supreme Court anyway, it will be up to the Supreme Court to really put in the money that it would otherwise need. And if you don't like the 10%, I'm sure the Supreme Court will have to do that anyway, and they'll have to find their way clear, so we can remove the 10%. I'm not really keen on that.
Oh, so we can delete this at the appropriate time?
You know, I'm easy, Your Honor, so far as these little things are concerned.
Mr. President, at this stage, may I be allowed to suspend my interpellation really in order to review carefully the issue on the jurisdiction, but just so that we can put on the record very clearly the issue of the jurisdiction that we are changing today. So with that, Mr. President, may I ask that my interpellation be suspended and come back. I understand Monday we can take this up again.
Thank you. Mr. President, Senator Ontiveros has manifested that she would want to interpellate on Monday also. So at this point, with the permission of the sponsor, I move to suspend consideration of Senate Bill 1399 under Committee Report number 58.
Yes, in Your Honor, we have people here coming from the police, PNP, and from the Supreme Court. Because they've been here since this afternoon, I feel a little bit embarrassed that we do have a schedule and they should abide by it. but I wish we could do it a little faster, if I may, if we may, so that we can get the job done, especially because of the times, Your Honor. Times are difficult.
We will ask the committee, the Rules Committee, to place it number 1 in the agenda on Monday, Mr. President.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Okay, so there's a motion to suspend consideration. Any objection? Hearing none, the motion is approved.
I move to suspend the session for a few minutes, Mr. President.
Session is suspended. Ano dito, Sen? Punta mo na.
muna yung individual amendments, baka meron sila. Okay. Diba? Ready to resume, Mr. President.
Session is resumed.
Mr. President, with the permission of the body, I move to resume consideration of Senate Bill 1466 under Committee Report 104. Prohibition of imposition
okay.
of expiry dates.
Okay, any objection? Hearing none, the motion is approved.
Mr. President, this is the act prohibiting the imposition of expiry dates on gift checks, certificates, or cards by issuer and for other purposes. And the parliamentary status of the measure is that we have already terminated the period of interpellation. So may I therefore move to open the period of committee amendments.
Any objection? Hearing none, we are now in the period for committee amendments.
I move that, I'm sorry, Mr. President, I move to open the period of amendments, individual amendments instead, Mr. President, because it's a substitute bill.
So, correction, we are now technically in the period for individual amendments.
Thank you. May we recognize the Chairman of the Committee on Trade and Commerce and Entrepreneurship, Senator Migs Subiri.
Senator Subiri is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, may I ask for a clarification from the Majority Leader? Is this a period of individual or committee?
Individual amendments because this is a substitute bill, Mr. President.
Okay, Mr. President. Well, the committee were ready to submit the amendments with the permission of the body. On page 1, line 9, delete the open parenthesis, DTI, close parenthesis. So I move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
On the same page, line 10, delete certificate slash and slash card. I so move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
On the same page, line 13, delete certificate slash and slash card. I so move, Mr. President.
Line 13.
Yes, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
On page 2, Mr. President, line 1, delete the words "and coverage" and replace with "off terms." I so move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
On the same page, delete lines 2 to 10 and replace with the reworded subparagraph A of section 4, which shall now read as follows. Gift check, also referred to as gift certificate or gift card, is any instrument issued to any person, comma, natural or juridical, comma, for monetary consideration, comma, honored upon presentation at a single merchant or an affiliated group of merchants as payment for consumer goods or services, period. The instrument may be in the form of paper, comma, card, comma, code, or whatever device. I so move, Mr. President. Or rather, code or other devices, period. I so move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
On the same page, after the last line of subsection A, which shall now be on line 6, insert a new subparagraph B under section 4 to read as follows. Letter B. Coupon or voucher is any instrument issued to any person, comma, natural or juridical, comma, for monetary consideration or otherwise, comma, that entitles the holder to a discount of a particular goods or service, comma, or that may be exchanged for a pre-identified good or service specified on the instrument, period. I so move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
On page 2, line 11, renumber subparagraph B to subparagraph C and delete hyphen and the words "any juridical entity that" and replace with the words "is any person, comma, natural or juridical, comma, who." So subparagraph C shall now read as follows, Mr. President. Letter C. Issuer is any person, natural, comma, natural or juridical, comma, who provides the instrument that holds value for which consumer goods or services will be exchanged, period. I so move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
On page 2, delete lines 13 to 18 and replace with the reworded section 5, which shall now read as follows. Section 5, prohibitions. Dash, the following acts shall be unlawful. Letter A, issuing a gift check that bears an expiry date. Letter B, imposing an expiry date on the stored value, comma, credit or balance of the gift check, or, letter C, refusing to honor the unused value, comma, credit or balance stored in the instrument, period. I so move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
After the last line of section 5, which shall now be on line 16, insert a new section 6 to read as follows. Section 6, exclusions, / gift checks that are, gift checks that are issued to consumers under loyalty, comma, rewards or promotional programs, comma, as determined by the Department of Trade and Industry, comma, are not covered by this act, period. Coupons or vouchers as defined under section 4, subparagraph B, are likewise not covered by this act, period. And renumber the succeeding sections accordingly. I so move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
On page 2, line 20, delete /certificate and /cards. I so move, Mr. President.
We are doing this because we are adopting uniform terminology.
Yes, yes, Your Honor.
Checks, what will be left? Gift check, no?
Gift check,
Check,
na po
check is
ang-
the one, yes.
Yes,
So
ma'am.
any objection? Hearing none, approved.
On the same page, line 21, delete /certificates and /cards. I so move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
On the same page, line 22, delete /certificate and /card and insert the word or after the semicolon. I so move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Insert or after semicolon,
That's correct, Your Honor, Mr. President.
or provided, it will become or provided.
Yes, correct, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved. Check nyo ngayon.
On the same page, line 23, delete /certificate and /card. I so move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
On the same page, line 27, delete /certificate and /card, semicolon, and replace with a colon. I so move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
On the same page, line 27, capitalize the letter T in the word that. I so move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
On the same page, line 28, capitalize the letter T in the word that as well, Mr. President. I so move. That's on line 28.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
On page 3, on line 1, delete the word to and replace the word with the word of. I so move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
On the same page, lines 2 to 3, delete the phrase senior citizens / persons with disability discounts and replace with the phrase discounts for senior citizens and persons with disability. I so move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
On the same page, line 3, delete the / and replace with the word or in between the word citizens and persons. I so move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Approved.
On the same page, line 4, delete the word and after the word loss and replace with a comma. I so move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Approved.
On the same page, line 4, delete the comma after the word regulations and the word likewise after the word shall. I so move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
On the same page, line 5, delete /certificate and /card and add S to the word check.
Okay.
I so move, Mr.
Yes.
President.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
After the last line of section 8, which shall now be on line 6, insert a new section 9 to read as follows. Section 9, transitory provision. Upon the effectivity of this act, comma, all gift checks already issued shall be covered by the provisions of this act. Holders of unused and unexpired gift checks shall, comma, at no additional cost, comma, be entitled to avail of replacement after revalidation by issuers, and renumber the succeeding sections accordingly, Mr. President. And I'd like to credit Senator Drilon for this particular provision. I so move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, the two amendments are approved.
On page 3, delete lines 6 to 8 and insert the renumbered and reworded section 10 to read as follows. Section 10, consumer complaints. Complaints for any violation of this act shall be made in accordance with the provisions of Chapter 3, Title 5 of Republic Act Number 7394, or the Consumer Act of the Philippines, period. I so move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Approved.
On page 3, delete lines 9 to 7 and replace with the renumbered and, 9 to 10, rather, and replace with the renumbered and reworded section 11 to read as follows. Section 11, penalties. Any person, comma, natural or juridical, comma, who violates the provision of this act shall be subject to a fine to be imposed by the Secretary of Trade and Industry, comma, which shall be in no case be less than 50,000 pesos nor more than 1 million pesos. And the reason for this, Mr. President, we're just adopting the Consumer Act. No? The Consumer Act of the Philippines, which actually tasks the Secretary to propose the fines. So I so move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
On page 3, line 11, delete ampersand and the ampersand sign and replace with the word end. I so move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
On the same line, delete open parenthesis DTI close parenthesis. I so move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Approved.
And finally, on the title of the bill, delete the comma after the word checks and delete the word certificates or cards by issuers, so that the title shall now read as follows: an act prohibiting the imposition of expiry dates on gift checks and for other purposes. I so move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
Thank you so much, Mr. President. Thank you, my colleagues.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move to close the period of amendments on Senate Bill 1466 under Committee Report 104.
Any objection? Hearing none, motion is approved.
Maybe ask the Secretary to provide the members a copy of the clean copy so that we can approve it on second reading on Monday, Mr. President. With that, I move to suspend consideration of Senate Bill 1466 under Committee Report 104.
Any objection? Hearing none, we suspend consideration.
Mr. President, I move to resume consideration of Senate Bill 1483 under Committee Report 117.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved. What is this?
This is the Fiscal and Monetary Report Act of 2017. The parliamentary status of the measure is now in the period of interpellation. So may we recognize the sponsor, Chairman of the Committee on Economic Affairs, Senator Gatchalian, and to interpellate Senator Resound. Huh?
Maling
Mali number.
We have a 1 minute suspension.
Session suspended. Mali number.
Mr. President, we're ready to resume.
Session is resumed.
Mr. President, I stand corrected. I withdraw my, rather, I move to suspend consideration of Senate Bill 1466. I asked for a...
1466?
Yes, move to suspend. Because we approved the...
1483.
No, yes, 1483.
Yes, 14.
Move to suspend.
So, any objection? Or the motion is approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move to resume consideration of Senate Bill 1439 instead, under Committee Report number 60.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
This is the measure on energy virtual one-stop shop, the parliamentary status of the measure within the period of interpellation. So may we recognize the sponsor, Senator Win Gatchalian, Chairman of the Committee on Energy, and to interpellate Senator Risa Ontiveros.
Senator Gatchalian, as sponsor, is recognized, and to interpellate Senator Ontiveros is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Would the good sponsor take just basically one question about one issue in the Energy Virtual One-Stop Shop Bill, Mr. President?
It's my pleasure and honor, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I asked the good sponsor to turn his attention to Section 15 of Committee Report number 60, to it. And here, good sponsor, please forgive me for a bit of an introduction to my one question. So Section 15, Indigenous Cultural Communities or Indigenous Peoples, which reads, application with NCIP, the National Commission on Indigenous Peoples, shall be resolved within a maximum period of 30 calendar days, provided that this shall not preclude the EVOS IATWG from imposing a shorter time frame for resolution of applications should it see the expediency and feasibility of doing so, provided further that denial of applications shall only be on valid grounds and fully explained in writing. Excuse me. Seems to me, Mr. President, good sponsor, that the intent of Section 16 is to shorten the process for securing NCIP certification, which is a requisite for the granting of any concession, license, or lease, or entering into any production sharing agreement. At the heart of the NCIP certification is the securing of a free, prior, and informed consent, or FPIC, these are practically sacred words in the IPRA, from the affected indigenous cultural communities. And last point in my introduction to my question, it's important to note that it's not the NCIP that provides the permit or authorization for the project. Rather, it's the indigenous community itself that is required to provide this FPIC, or free, prior, and informed consent, pursuant to the IPRA. The role of the NCIP in this is merely to certify that the FPIC process was observed. So, good sponsor, according to the NCIP Administrative Order 3, Series of 2012, at least 2 community assemblies and a consensus building period are required. So my question is, the first part of my one question is 30 days really, is 30 days a reasonable amount of time for an ICC, an indigenous cultural community, to gather its members in one place and for those members to come to a consensus regarding a project?
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you for the inquiry. Unfortunately, last May 31, we provided the members a copy of the substitute bill, basically stating the amount of time that will be given for certificate of non-overlaps and also free, prior, and informed consent certifications. We specified in the new substitute bill that 10 calendar days will be given for the issuance of certificate of non-overlap and 75 calendar days for the certificate of free, prior, and informed consent. Basically, just to inform the good lady from Akbayan that during the hearings, one of the most glaring issues that came out during our hearings came from 2 independent organizations. This is the NCIP, or the Indigenous Peoples Commission, and the other one is the LGU. For proponents of power projects, these 2 are basically the biggest stumbling blocks in terms of acquiring permits or pre-construction permits. And what the concept that we developed for the indigenous cultural communities is, yes, we respect the process that they have to undergo. We respect the law that governs the indigenous people communities, but we have to put a reasonable time frame for them to conduct their own hearings and finally issue permits and certifications. For applications which will not have any encroachment in their ancestral domain, we gave 10 calendar days for them to issue a certificate of non-overlap. The reason for this is wala naman naging overlap, or there's no encroachment. For areas which have encroachment, they can proceed with their process, but we're only giving 75 calendar days for that process. This actually came about by consulting with the proponents of power projects and consulting with them the actual activities that they have to undergo during this type of engagement with NCIP.
Thank you, Mr. President. My follow-up questions were premised on the original proposed period of only 30 days. Right. Do I understand it correctly, Mr. President, that with the proposal now in the substitute bill of 10 calendar days for issuance of certificate of non-overlap, plus 75 days for issuing the certificate of achieving the FPIC, that for indigenous peoples in whose ancestral domain projects are proposed to be implemented, specifically power projects, that this would total a total of 85 days? Do I understand that correctly? Or these are two separate
two distinct certifications.
All right.
And the original bill, we only indicated 30 days.
Yes.
That's in the original bill. But after consulting with the power proponents as well as the Department of Energy, we think that this 75 calendar days being given is reasonable, considering that there are other agencies that power proponents have to go through to get their pre-construction permits.
I appreciate, Mr. President, that the 75 days is more than double the original proposed period of 30 days. At the same time, I'd like to note that I hope that the time will come that, of course, NCIP, but also the LGUs, also the proponents of power projects, and our very own Department of Energy will see processes like the FPIC not as stumbling blocks, but as enablers for indigenous peoples in their ancestral domains to participate even in the national energy development projects of the government, as we have seen, and I'm sure the good sponsor has seen in other countries, where indigenous peoples in their ancestral domains actually strongly partner government or the private sector, especially in renewable energy projects, which I know is also of particular interest or an advocacy of the good sponsor. I would like to respectfully reserve the right, Mr. President, good sponsor, to study this a little more, the 75-day period, with our IP partners, and possibly propose an amendment at the proper time. My last question at this point in time, Mr. President, it's just a continuation of our earlier discussion. Would the good sponsor have other ideas about how to balance the legitimate aims of this bill with the equally important need to preserve the spirit and the letter of the IPRA and meaningful FPIC, Mr. President?
Right. We recognize the importance that the Constitution gives to the indigenous people communities, as well as the due process that the IPRA laid down for projects like this, energy projects and other projects. However, looking at the IPRA and also looking at the various circulars, none of which indicate a timetable to conduct all of this consultations and their own due diligence. So we respect the process. We respect the IPRA law as the guiding law for the indigenous peoples communities. However, this bill actually is a bill that calls for a streamlining of all of these processes. So we just indicated the time for all of these processes so that as a whole, when you apply for energy projects, we will have a certain time frame that energy projects need to comply with and need to undergo with when they get their own pre-construction permits.
Thank you, Mr. President. One more follow-up question. Will we penalize the indigenous peoples or the community if they exceed the proposed 75 days? And if so, what would the penalties be, Mr.
Right.
President?
Actually, in the proposed bill, if ever the NCIP will go beyond the prescribed time frame, and there is no valid reason for them to deny the projects, the bill calls for its automatic approval. But for example, there are concrete issues and legitimate issues, then they can actually raise those issues during the applications of these power projects.
Thank you, Mr. President. In that case, if there would be automatic approval beyond the 75-day period, then I'll almost surely propose an amendment at the proper time after consultation, further consultation with our IP partners, so that the proposal coming from them can be weighed by the good sponsor, a certain period within which they can meaningfully exercise their right either to say go or no go to an energy project, or for that matter, any other.
We would gladly, we're welcome to listen to any proposals that will improve this provision of the bill. I think what we want to achieve here is really certainty in terms of time frame, and unfortunately none of the circulars as well as the governing law on the indigenous peoples communities have that certain time frame. So by practice, what happens is when they apply for a project with the indigenous people communities, it can take as long as 2 years, sometimes as long as 4 years, I think. As stated by our minority floor leader, I think Senator Durlon has direct experience with this type of application. But what we want here really is certainty, certainty that a time frame should be met.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I can guess with almost 100% certainty the project that my minority leader is referring to, where, of course, according to accounts from the ground, only one barangay in the end, after a very long, drawn-out process, was left actively opposing the project.
Mr. President, just to compare, the other issue that came out during the hearing is that same tedious application with the local government unit. So in Section 16 of the proposed bill, we capped the application at 15 calendar days, much shorter than the time frame that we gave the indigenous people communities. The reason for that is the local governments, currently how the local governments operate, you have to go through the 3 levels, the barangay, the municipal city, and then the province. But in essence, eventually, it's a province that approves all of this. It goes up to the province. So after consulting with ULAP, which is the umbrella organization of the local government units, they do agree that we can consolidate the application at the provincial level. The governor will just call the barangay, the governor will just call the mayors, and in 15 days, they can approve the application. And the same thing, if don't act on it, the application will be deemed approved. If not, they have to really specify concrete reasons as to why the project will be denied.
Thank you, Mr. President. I appreciate the expansiveness rather than the restrictiveness that the good sponsor has shown in amending the original proposed period of 30 days to 75 days. So as I promised earlier, I will study this further, consult a bit more about it, and then propose an amendment at the proper time. Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, good sponsor.
Mr. President, let me just re-emphasize, in both autonomous organization, the NCIP and the LGU, we do respect the due process that they have to undertake in approving the project. That's why we put time frames for them to comply with. And those time frames were duly consulted with the proponents. And if they really want to approve projects immediately, these time frames are quite feasible and can be achieved.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Good sponsor.
Thank you.
Mr. President, I move to suspend consideration of Senate Bill 1439.
Any objection? Hearing none, the motion is approved.
Mr. President, just some housekeeping. Upon the request of Senator Zubiri, after getting the concurrence of the principal author of the bills, the Senate President Pimentel, I move that Senator Zubiri be made co-author of Senate Bill 114.
Senator Zubiri is made co-author.
Thank you. Mr. President, upon the request of the Chair of the Committee on Local Government, Senator Sani Angara, after getting the concurrence of Senator De Lima, the Chair of the Committee on Electoral Reforms and People's Participation, I move that Senate Bill 1469 be transferred to transfer its referral from the Committee on Local Government to the Committee on Electoral Reforms. So moved, Mr. President.
Is there any objection to the motion? Hearing none, it is so transferred.
Mr. President, I move to adjourn the session until 3 o'clock in the afternoon of Monday, August 7, 2017.
Is there any objection? Hearing none, session is adjourned until 3 o'clock in the afternoon of Monday, August 7, 2017.